Kia ora, I'm Paul Sinclair, co-founder of OFNZ, and welcome to Kiwi Fleas, where I catch up with one of the million Kiwis who've exported themselves out of Aotearoa New Zealand. Whether a brain drain or a brain gain working in our favour is just one question I'm now exploring, one expat New Zealander story at a time. Today's Kiwi Flea left New Zealand in 1985. Our then Prime Minister David Lange had just launched New Zealand's nuclear-free status. Split ends, the chills and the dance exponents were defining the Dunedin sound. A loaf of bread cost $2.40, a pint of milk was just 35 cents, and that hirsute crime against humanity, the perm, was taking a devilishly strong hold in hair salons across the motu. My guest today left New Zealand after securing a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford, graduating with a BA in Divinity with first-class honours, a Master's and a doctorate in English. He's a former New Zealand Mastermind semi-finalist, academic and cleric, and a 25-year veteran writer of fiction, non-fiction, verse and editorial. One of his novels, Quintember, was shortlisted for the People's Book Prize, and he's lived in 10 countries, by my count anyway, over the last 40 years, including India, Australia, the United States, Italy, the United Kingdom, Slovenia, Hungary, South Africa, Palestine and Cyprus, before returning full circle to Oxford in the UK just a few weeks ago. He once climbed an active volcano, Mount Etna in Sicily, wearing a tweed suit and brogues, fueled by a cheese sandwich which he toasted on the volcanic rock, also known as lava, and a bottle of red wine before being escorted off by two bewildered local skiers who, weirdly, declined his offer of a glass of red before making good their escape. Dr. Richard Major, welcome to Kiwi Fleas and happy birthday.
Thank you very much, Paul.
What are you doing to celebrate? Apart from talking to me for an hour, or just under?
Oh, well, yeah, you're the high point of it. The rest of it's downhill. Meeting friends for lunch at this wonderfully grand restaurant, and then going for a walk along the river where it's raining, as it always is in England, and then meeting about 30 people at a pub this evening.
Lovely.
So,
lovely.
Fairly calm.
Very good. Well, thanks again for joining me, Richard. I have it on reasonably good authority that the lava flowing out of Mount Etna is known in lava circles as something called basaltic stratovolcano. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, there are two sorts of volcanoes, you probably know. There are the serious, nice ones like Ruapehu and Egmont, and then the silly ones that are just dribbles. And there's essentially a dribbly one.
Well, it's a dribbly one, it might be. But I also, after talking to some lava worshippers, have it on really good authority that the lava in Mount Etna comes in at between 1,000 and 1,200 degrees Celsius. That's only about 4,000 degrees cooler than the surface of the sun. And I'm interested to know whether at any point, while you were staring into Etna's bubbling crater of death as you munched on a toasted sandwich and sipped your bubbling Beaujolais, did you ever consider that trying to light your cigar on basaltic lava was perhaps an ungood idea?
No, because it was so exciting. The moment I changed my mind was when I fell through the ground. It was midwinter, so the ground was very icy. And I was standing quite close to the river of lava when suddenly the ground vanished and I plunged down 5 foot. But during those 5 foot, I thought, oh, God, I'm going to land straight into the basaltic lava.
And?
And no, I landed very close to it. And 1,400 degrees Celsius is exactly what it felt like. It's a de-recommended method for toasting a sandwich. We put it on tin foil and let it float along the surface of the lava, and it tasted revolting. I'd stick to barbecues, I say.
How long did it take you to climb the mountain? I've never climbed it. No?
A couple of hours. We had to climb over. I was with my very badly behaved cousin. We had to climb over various police barriers because the Italian police had shut the volcano off on the trivial grounds that it was dangerous. So we had to climb off. We had to go off piste a bit and climb over things. It's not a very serious mountain because it's a stratovolcano. It's like an oozing sore on the side of your leg. It just comes out, dribbles, and stays on being flat. It's good fun. I love volcanoes. I've been lucky. I've seen volcanoes in action all over the world, and they're very exciting. They really are lovely to see.
You make a habit of actually identifying volcanoes in the world that are going off at the time and actually walking your way up them and around police barriers, just to say you have?
No, that would be a sickness. I've just been lucky. God loves me. Whenever I go somewhere, He arranges for a volcano to blow up. No, I mean, not so much Oxfordshire, but it happened in Asia a couple of times. Happened in Africa. My wife is intermittently in East African country at the moment, which is almost entirely volcanic. So it's just black. It's black soil absolutely everywhere.
Richard, I'd like you to cast your mind back. I do ask everyone I talk to on this pod back to a moment that you laughed harder than you've ever laughed before in your life. I'd really love that to be in New Zealand, but I appreciate you've been gone for a wee while, so it's not mandatory. But where were you? Who were you with? And what were you up to?
I was with a then famous media personality whose name I'm going to leave out, who was with me, and we'd gone drinking after some filming session. And he had just made the most humiliating mistake, second most humiliating mistake of his life. He had been comparing Miss New Zealand, which has probably been abolished, has it?
I believe so.
Yeah. Well, back in those days, there were these straightforward beauty contests of a sort we'd probably find a bit gross now. But he had announced the wrong winner. So the wrong female had been crowned and was weeping the statutory tears of joy when it turned out she had lost. And he said it was the second most embarrassing experience of his life. And because he was drunk, and I asked him what the first most, he told me, and it involved, believe it or not, a Marmite jar. Do you still have Marmite out there?
Yeah, absolutely we do. Yeah,
well, horrible stuff. Absolutely horrible. It's one of the reasons I left. And he had caused that Marmite jar to go where Marmite jars are not intended to go.
Oh my gosh!
And then it got stuck. I just wouldn't come out. So,
is this a true story? This sounds apocryphal. I think I've heard stories like this before.
It's a true story.
Okay.
In fact, more than true, it's actually a public welfare broadcast moment, because I'm telling people out there in Kiwi Fleas land not to do this with their jars of Marmite, because you have to go off to hospital. And in the hours before it was removed, almost everybody in the hospital came and visited. He said he repented being born and remained in that state for many weeks afterwards.
I wish that had been Vegemite. At least you could have picked on the Australians for that one. But no, you had to go to homegrown Marmite. All good.
Yeah.
Your biography is divided into 4 acts. The one that I've seen anyway. Act 1 being your life in New Zealand from 1963 to 85, while Act 2, which is where we're going to pick up the story, sees you flying out of a, recently nuclear-free and fully permed up New Zealand and bound for Oxford. What were you feeling as that plane made its way north to the UK, apart from your ears popping?
Well, I was excited. I'd never been on a plane before. I was a good working class boy from Tawa. So I'd never been on a plane before. I disgraced myself by whooping with joy when we took off, which I didn't know I was going to do. It was exciting. I had a wonderful time. I felt at home in England at once, even though it's 7 generations since my family had been there, and settled in. I was an extremely wicked student for years. I discovered all the joys of the place and enjoyed myself very, very much. Finally buckled down, got my doctorate, got elected to a place, did a bit of teaching, and then pushed off into the Church of England. So the second act of my life was partly being an academic, partly working for the church in various places in London and Cornwall and Italy, and then over in America.
I want to go back to what got you to Oxford in the first place before we move and propel our way forward to these congregations and places that you've worked. You were on a Rhodes Scholarship that year, weren't you? And you weren't the only Rhodes Scholar to come from New Zealand. Who were you joined by in 85?
What was his name? Rugby playing chap, Kirk.
David Kirk.
My book, David Kirk.
Yeah,
David Kirk. Nice bloke. Didn't see very much of him in England, but he was a very pleasant chap. So we headed over in exactly this time of year, exactly 40 years ago, and arrived in England. Oxford's an interesting university because it's clever and wonderful and beautiful, but it's also very international. So it's an education just meeting everybody, because there are people from every country in the world here. It's much more varied in every way, much more socially varied than perhaps people think from the stereotypes.
I'm going to ask you to talk more about Oxford in a minute, but I am interested just to explore or have you share a wee story, because I understand there was a wee bit of confusion at Oxford when you rocked up with David Kirk, because I remember you telling a story about you looked more like the rugby player.
Yeah, I'm grotesquely tall, and he's was nicely proportioned, which is to say, shortish. And he is or was. Is he still around? I'm afraid I've lost.
Yeah, he's become a sort of captain of industry.
Has he? Has he? Oh, that's nice. He was. He was, and I hope, no doubt is, gentle, courteous, diffident, quite shy, pleasant, and I'm not. So I just looked like the overfed thug that people often picture coming out of Australasia. So yeah, they did rather think I was the rugby player.
You settle in at Magdalen College, where you also rowed, I think, and captain and ate, before moving to Exeter College to continue your studies from 89 to 91. But I'm interested for you to really describe for us what Oxford was like. Paint me a picture. You started, I interrupted, I wanted to take you to another point, but now I'd love you to paint me a picture that would be useful for the next Kiwi scholar heading on that bearing, or someone who may be thinking that way.
Okay, well, it's the most beautiful university in the world, but it's also the most exciting. It genuinely is full of people who are, clever. Everyone's clever, but interested and interesting. You find out about the whole world from being there. You're overwhelmed by the variety, the wit, the charm, the mental energy of people. It's a university. It's a very serious university for study, for teaching, and you are on your own. You really do have to propel yourself. But it's also a place where you grow up as a person very quickly. You become much more aware of, the emotional and social and God knows sexual possibilities of life. It's a thrilling place. It's like any university on steroids. I can't recommend it enough to anybody thinking of going there.
What's the alchemy? What creates that mix?
Well, partly age goes a long way. Institutions sometimes grow younger, and that's the case of Oxford. There's been regular tertiary teaching there since the 11th century, and it becomes younger and younger and fresher and more nimble as it goes on. So that's the first thing. Second thing is money.
Oh, hang on, I've got to ask you a question there. How does it do that? That kind of because I love the answer. It defies logic, and I want to understand how that works.
Yeah, institutions when they're young tend to be rather pompous and full of themselves, and difficult to bend. They're very on their dignity. They're cautious. They want to make sure they're doing the right thing. When you've been doing the right thing for 8.5 centuries, you've stopped worrying, and you can say, think anything you like. So there's an atmosphere of extreme mental liberty. People do think through ideas. People do try on attitudes. People are affected. Let's use the word. They're affected in a reckless way, which wouldn't be possible elsewhere. So you do feel you're living life at the full tide. People are more colourful, less inhibited, more creative. So it's overwhelming socially as well as intellectually. I'm making it sound a bit frivolous. I mean, it's not just a summer camp. People are working very hard and studying very seriously, and even I did in the end. But it is also just in terms of people, a thrilling place to be.
I'm interested in that. 8 centuries. that it takes before you're honest enough to say what you like and you're reverting backwards. I think I've seen that in family members when they get to 8 decades.
Yeah, which is virtually me now. Senility is kicking in, and that means I'm free of my very last inhibitions. My children are dreading it.
You also taught at Oxford while studying for your theology degree, didn't you? And you were preparing to become an ordained or become ordained as an Anglican priest.
Yes.
My uncle, Ron,
yes.
was a Dannyvert dairy farmer before he had what he used to talk to me about as this thing called a calling to the church. And I've always suspected it was a happier calling for him than like a 4 a.m. calling for going milking. I just wondered, I've heard this a lot, and I just wondered, do you ever talk about being called, and what does that mean?
Well, I don't know. I'm a bit shy about using that sort of language. I hope it was part of the divine plan that I went into the church. I don't like describing it in a way which sounds creepy and feely. I'm sounding evasive because I am being evasive. I believe in the idea of vocation without wanting to pin it down very much.
What was the initial draw?
Well, I believed it all. That may not be apparent, but I find Christianity to be entirely plausible. I mean, let's say I think it's true, and the church is also, most of the time, often, sometimes, very often, a delightful thing to work in. It is nice to do something that's worthwhile. It's nice to be in a profession which both draws on your education and whatever intellectual properties you have to offer, but is dealing with real people rather than just being in the bubble of the university. It's exciting. It's an extremely varied sort of career. My first job was down in Cornwall, which now is extremely fashionable and, in fact, plutocratic. But in those days, it was a very poor part of England. And I was working with people who had never left Cornwall in their lives, spoke an intense dialect of English, were, rough and ready, were easily shocked by tidings of the big world, had to be helped along. One of the things I did was prepare people for marriage. And down in Cornwall, there's a strange Methodist tradition of trying to keep young people in ignorance. So I found myself on quite a few occasions having to explain the birds and the bees to these 19-year-old girls and boys who are about to get married. And they always responded with incredulity, with disbelief, which sort of shakes your confidence and your grasp on the facts after a while.
It never extended from the birds to the bees to the Marmite jar, I hope.
No. This was more or less, the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
But even the straight and narrow was a bit beyond their experience or their knowledge.
So you're doing like a marriage preparation for marriage in the church, right? Some sort of guidance work with them. How did this reveal itself for the first time?
Oh well, unfortunately down there you have to check. The usual drill is to send the boy out of the room and talk to the girl and just make sure she knows what she's getting into, physically speaking. And honestly, she didn't always know.
Right.
The boy was slightly less likely to be ignorant, but it was an issue. And the other thing down in Cornwall in those days was you had to be quite careful about whether you were marrying the right people. There are villages down there that I'm sure it's all different now. I'm talking about 30 years ago. But there were villages down there that still had a reputation for incest.
Right.
And unfortunately, there's a negative feedback loop when a village has a reputation for incest. It's also true of Aotearoa, I'm told, nowadays. If the word gets round that people are very closely related to each other villages don't want to mate with them. And so it gets worse. And one of the things you had to do was check the birth certificates of these people very carefully to make sure they weren't posing as their own cousins.
No.
No, absolutely true. There's a superstition down in Cornwall that if a child's born out of wedlock, it'll be deformed. or backward. I mean, what backward means in Cornwall 30 years ago, I'm not quite sure. And therefore they'll go through a form of marriage, even if it's an illicit form of marriage with a half-sister or worse.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. All right. This was it Truro Cathedral that you were at? Is that how we say that?
Truro Cathedral, that's right. Yeah. Cornwall, in case anyone hasn't come across it, sticks out far to the southwest of England, and it is in most ways a different country. It's much more different from England than Wales is. The people, although they speak English now, are racially different. The climate's entirely different.
Yeah,
it's much more like Southern European temperatures. The Gulf Stream keeps it warm. There are palm trees everywhere. They have their own cuisine, and it's extremely beautiful. It's got a huge rocky coast. A bit like, bits of Northland in New Zealand. It's very lovely. Nowadays, of course, it's been discovered and it's full of money. But in those days, it was by far the poorest part of southern England. And you were living in a different economic world as well down there.
So the contrast here for me was interesting when I look at some of your posts around the world at this period. And these may not be in chronological order, but I've got Truro in Cornwall. I've got St Mark's in Florence, I've got Westminster Abbey in London, I've got St Mary's on Staten Island and New York City, amongst others. Now,
that's right.
You're posting in Florence in 1998. Just paint a picture of the contrast here. That came with a 15th century palazzo, complete with a ballroom. Yes. And then in 2002, you moved to a Gothic vicarage on Staten Island, New York. I'm really interested to hear you describe for me just how different your life was. First, living in Florence. I can't take every post you've ever done. You've got quite a few in your CV, obviously, Richard.
Yeah.
But first living in Florence, and then the move to Staten Island, New York.
Yeah, Florence is gorgeous. There's always been a large English expatriate community out in Tuscany. And so there was this English church, which actually dates from the 16th century in Tuscany, English and therefore Anglican. And there was a beautiful place in the middle of Florence, just over Ponte San Trinita, for people who have been there, just by the River Arno. So the whopping great palazzo built by Machiavelli's nephew, Daniele Machiavelli. And the church was on the ground floor, which had been the stables. I know that sounds horrible. It actually worked very well. It had a sort of Byzantine darkness to it. And upstairs was me. And it's extremely nice. My God, it's nice living in a palazzo. It's nice having a ballroom. I didn't know before I got one that I needed one, and I've been missing it for the rest of my life. You just can't give the right sort of parties if you don't have space for 200 people to dance. I had an absolutely wonderful time there.
Describe your congregation there before we get on to Staten Island.
Vile. Uniformly vile. They're the expatriates, and they were often dodgy aristocratic people who had been packed out there by their families because they were just too dotty or unpleasant to be endured in England. So we had very grand people with very, very, very strange manners. And then there were the expatriates. So a huge number of tourists, English-speaking tourists, flood through Tuscany every summer. Too many of them, in fact. So they were the second group. The third group was art students. There are an awful lot of English-speaking art students who come and live in Florence or Siena for a year. So we effectively had three congregations: a congregation of extremely eccentric ex-English people living in decaying villas in the hills, huge numbers of tourists passing through. Tourists go to church, English-speaking tourists go to church more on holiday than they do at home. I don't know why. And then students, the art students who were bohemian or pseudo-bohemian, and we put on special services for them in the evening because they didn't get up in the morning. So that it was all extremely exciting. They liked getting me to model for them because they said it's nice to have a contrast of painting somebody who was old. At this stage, I was 32. So I have a humiliating number of drawings and paintings and sculptures of myself sitting in an attic somewhere, left over from Florence days.
Fully clothed?
Some of them, most of them. I belonged to a life, to go back in history, but I belonged to a life drawing class in Oxford because it's just wonderful to learn to draw. Everybody should do it, including me. I failed, but learning to draw is wonderful. You see the world in an entirely different way if you're, instead of vaguely thinking that's a pretty hillside, that's a nice tree. If you're actually trying to imagine how you would render it on paper, you train the eye, and your experience of the world, your visual experience of the world, jumps up a power of 10. Well, we had a life drawing class because the most important thing to learn to draw is the human body. And back at university days, I belonged to a life drawing class where the idea was we put in a fiver, and that bought us a couple of bottles of wine and a model. So we'd sit around drawing. But a friend of mine was made the treasurer, which was an idiotic move because he was an idiot and got the money wrong. He spent too much money on the wine, which I admit was very good. Therefore, we had to take turns modelling. So somewhere I've got a portfolio of 20 pictures of me. It's not a very good method. It's very important with a life class that the model be hired, because then the model is just a hireling and you can ignore what he or she says. But if the model is one of you, it becomes much more difficult, because during the breaks from drawing, you can only pose for X minutes before muscle ache. So during the pauses, I'd go around and complain, that is not what I look like. That should be smaller. That should be very much bigger. Anyway, these scandalously unkind drawings of me are in a portfolio somewhere. I should probably find them and get them out when I'm ever feeling,
You move from
insufficiently depressed.
You move from there to Staten Island. Was that the end? Was that the end of the life drawing classes, or how did things roll on Staten?
You wouldn't want to draw Staten Island as unclothed or clothed, really. I got married in the course of my time in. Well, just before we moved to Florence, but I was still in London. I was briefly in London as a parish. And I got married while I was there to an excellent American, to whom I'm still married 28 years on.
Congratulations.
Is that right? I can't really count beyond 20 anymore. A very, very, very large number of years. So I got married to her. She was an academic, an American academic, and she was flitting back between Florence and some godforsaken university in Iowa, which was a bit of a contrast. Ames, Iowa, dreadful part of the world. My God!
Anyway, hang on a minute. How do you really feel about Ames, Iowa, Richard?
It's Ames, Iowa. It's the Palmerston North of Iowa, and Iowa is the Palmerston North of America. I can't put it more strongly than that. It's a dire place. My God, so flat and tiresome and grim. And my poor wife had to oscillate between Ames and it would drive to Iowa City, which was like Constantinople during the Byzantine Empire compared to Ames, and then fly to Florence. Anyway, it really wasn't working for her to be cut off. So we decided to move to the east coast of America, and we did that in the first couple of years of this century. And I ended up with a parish on Staten Island, which, in case you haven't been there, nobody's been there. It's absolutely zero. Even people who've lived in New York all their lives have not been to Staten Island.
Why? Why is that?
Well, it's extremely unfashionable. It's the place where the gangsters and the firemen and the policemen live.
Right.
So there's not much crime there, because the gangsters go off to commit crime in Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx. But they live there. It's very, very, very unfashionable. There's this huge prejudice against it. And oddly enough, it was fashionable in the 1860s, 70s, 80s. It's where the money of Manhattan went to summer. So there's this tiny little corner of Staten Island, which is full of, my God, they're beautiful. Lovely, lovely, lovely villas. And a very, very, very beautiful church, and a huge and wonderful rectory, which is St. Parsonage, built by Ralph Adams Cram, who's my favorite American architect. It was meant to look like a 13th century fortified farmhouse. And I know that sounds wanky, but in fact, it really was a spectacularly beautiful. It's the most beautiful house I've ever lived in. And I've lived in a Renaissance palazzo. it was a wonderful house. So I was there. A curious congregation, but it was a lovely place to live. I had an acre of ground around me, which is obviously a most unusual thing to have in New York City. And every evening on the dot of 6 o'clock, having finished singing evensong, I would make myself a martini and go around and bolt all the gates. And that meant I had an acre of ground and my very beautiful house and 3 fireplaces and a graveyard.
And a sexton who was a poet.
And a sexton.
A sexton who was a poet.
Lovely fellow. He has actually moved to England. I heard from him this morning. He's a fantastic chap, and it was his job to look after the physicalities of the place and to dig the graves, among other things. He fell in once. Digging graves is much more. In fact, the whole business of graves is much more dangerous than people grasp. Obviously, it's fatal for the person involved, but it's actually surprisingly dangerous for other people. I have done a funeral where this woman gave a howl of grief and despair. Why? She said, why? Which was, fair enough. But her husband was 88. So, it shouldn't have come as such a shock. She said, oh, why? I can't bear it. And she jumped. She did what you're always told doesn't happen. She jumped in. And this was we've jumped it back a bit now. This is in London somewhere, down on the south side of the river where the water table is high, and you have to dig deep because otherwise it's too muddy. So she vanished over the side and plunged down, bang, onto the coffin, and we leaned over. She was quite a long way down, and she was short and fat, and she changed her mind almost at once. Oh, I don't like it. Get me out. It's all very well saying that, but she was so far down, it wasn't easy to get her off. So the cemetery staff went off for a ladder. This wasn't the first time. They went off for a ladder, and meanwhile, the rest of us had to make conversation around the grave while she wailed and screamed down in the muddy darkness. So yes, this is another public service announcement. Don't jump into graves.
What do you think of this idea I've seen on natural burials, where I've seen it in America, one of the states, where people are buried in a suitably sized hole, and they have a tree planted on top of them instead of a gravestone, and they create a forest out of.
Sounds rather nice.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like it. You have to be a bit careful in America. It's not so much true elsewhere, but you have to be careful. Undertakers can be very dodgy people, and they want to make money. And there's not much money to be made in digging a hole and putting somebody in it. So they're always inventing ways of making the process expensive. And one of them, very prevalent in America, is embalming. So it's the opposite of the idea you're talking about. Instead of becoming part of nature, you get eviscerated and pumped full of horrible chemicals, really dreadful chemicals, and then painted like a whore. I sound angry because I am. It's a disgusting thing to do to a human body, to turn it into this pseudo-perpetual painted piece of prettiness.
Awful, isn't it?
It's dressed up. Women are dressed up in these sort of mock ball gowns, and men in mock suits. And then in America, they often pump the lead casket empty of air and put it in 2 or 3 layers and lower it down into a vault. And the claim is that you'll survive a nuclear attack. But what's the point of that? It's a horrible idea.
It's just too weird.
No, it's on aesthetic grounds and on Christian grounds. It's obviously it's proper to go into the earth and rot, and it would be lovely to nourish a tree. But as I say, if anyone dies in America, you have to make sure that your survivor fights off the undertakers, because if you're not careful, they're going to start pumping formaldehyde.
Well, and you obviously have the choice not to have that. I mean, you can just say, put me in the chiller.
You have to have a choice. You do have a choice in theory, but in fact, the undertaking industry in America is ruthless, and it catches people at their most vulnerable. Hubby's just pushed off, and you're feeling all soft and emotional. They tell you, "Well, did you really love him? Is it really worth spending $10,000 on him, or don't you really care?" And so they score. They score victories, and people do get embalmed and painted, and it's the norm in America. Most people are embalmed, which is disgusting. I can't say how repulsive it is from lots of angles. One is that our civilization is obviously coming to an end. Soon enough, archaeologists from another civilization are going to start digging us up. And the thing they're going to find is these horribly well embalmed people all over America
who bear no resemblance to the real thing.
So I'm telling your listeners, don't die in America, and if you do, go to some trouble not to end up embalmed like an Egyptian pharaoh.
I'm going to push you to Act 3. This opens for me anyway in 2007. And by this stage, you've moved on. You're on to in Madras in India. Then you go to Slovenia, Hungary, South Africa, Roslin, Palestine, and Baltimore. Now, you're now working as a writer, a teacher, diplomatic spouse, and layman. Am I right in that?
Yeah. Two things happened. One is that my wife, who was an academic, decided that she didn't want to be an academic anymore, quite rightly too, and got out and decided she wanted to be a diplomat instead. So her second career was as an American diplomat. So she was posted all over the world. And the second thing is that I, by a process of evolution, which I don't think I can make it sound very interesting, became a Roman Catholic. So that ended my career in the Church of England. And since then I've been a papist wandering around the world. And I've been traveling with her. And the nice thing about this change of life, this third act, as you call it, is that it's compatible to be a diplomatic spouse and to be a writer. Being a diplomatic spouse isn't really compatible with many other things. And there are some very unhappy diplomatic spouses, usually wives, who have, upped sticks in their homeland and are going around the world. And they can play tennis and they can lunch, but it can feel a fairly empty life. I was very lucky because writing full time is extremely compatible with being a trailing spouse. In fact, being a trailing spouse makes it much easier to do. So I started writing, and I've been writing full time ever since.
Talk me through that. What have you been writing?
Well, trashy journalism, or slightly less trashy journalism, so lots and lots and lots of that. I was the correspondent for a London review in America and elsewhere, so that meant my stuff was appearing every week. Journalism is a good school for writing. Everything that people say about it is true in a way. It can be shoddy, it can be sensationalist, it can be crude, but it does introduce the idea of discipline. If anyone wants to write, the very last thing he should do is go into a room and commune with his dark muse and reach into his heart and try to drag to the surface floppy bits of emotion. That won't get you writing anything worth reading. The great thing about journalism is that it's disciplined. Your editor gets on to you, sends you an email and says, yes, I'm sorry it's 10 o'clock at night, but we've just had to spike an article. We need 4,300 words on this by 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Is that a problem? And unfortunately, the more, obsequious, I suppose is the word, the more compliant you are, the more you get a reputation as a good journalist, that is to say, somebody who can rescue editors from their mistakes. And therefore, the more commissions you get to write things at incredible speed and the right length. When they say 4,300, they don't mean 4,000 and they don't mean 4,500. And the closer you are to the deadline, the more correct it has to be when you send it off. So it's a really good discipline to write for immediate publication.
But you've also been writing books as well. You've been writing novels. And
I was writing books as well.
Yeah.
I was writing.
I think there's a libretto in there at some point as well, a long way back. But we'll go to the books if we could. I am interested in the discipline of you writing books, because you've told me what you don't do. But if I look at your novel Quintember, I think did you publish in 2016? I think around this, 2016. I think
that sounds about right. So it came out about 8 years ago.
So the protagonist in there is an unorthodox scholar, academic, Dr. Felix Culpepper, isn't it?
Yeah. He's a Cambridge classicist. He's a dreadful classicist. I mean, he's a dreadful human being as well. But he discovers he does have a penchant for doing people in. And he becomes not a detective, on the contrary, he becomes an assassin to the establishment, because the the premise of the book, the gag, is that the English establishment needs to murder people very frequently. So he's forever doing people in for the Prime Minister or the Archbishop of Canterbury or the royal family. He does them in dramatic ways. Gosh, I'm making it sound very silly.
Well,
I think it is. They're quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, the narrative summary I've seen talks about the weave of academia, murder, espionage, drugs, and guns, and I have to go. So, how much of that is you, Richard?
Well, I don't often do people in. I do know how to do guns and things, because the nice thing about one of the nice things about being a diplomatic spouse is that an American diplomatic spouse is that they take security very seriously. So every couple of years I have to go and do this course called Crash and Bang, where you learn what to do if you're being attacked by two people with knives, or if you're in a car and your driver is shot. I know what to do. I know how to tear people's ears off, and I know how to poke their eyes out.
Oh my gosh.
Haven't done it, and I don't imagine in Oxfordshire I'll have very much needs to tear people's ears off. But if it comes to it, I know the technique.
So going to say then that as a diplomat's spouse, you've been fed quite a lot of information, and some of the narrative that has appeared in your books has come from your training on how to defend yourself when you're shot and your driver's shot. Or
I suppose. I suppose so. Well, maybe. Most of what my anti-hero does is a bit more baroque than that. He doesn't shoot people. He tends to drag them live down badger sets so they can be eaten, that sort of thing. In fact, my children when we were living in India, they got 10 rupees whenever they thought of a new way of killing somebody.
And they were, 6 and 4 at the time?
4 and 3, but they had a murderous streak. I hope it's clear these books are supposed to be funny. They are supposed to be funny. Yeah. There's a cycle of them. There are 18 novels forming a continuous narrative. So 5 of them have come out so far. They're going to be reissued next year.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm a plotter, very much a plotter. So I know there's a single story. It goes from the first page of the first novel to the last page of the 18th novel. So it's a single story it's supposed to be a sort of satirical survey of the age, meaning really the age before this one, the age that ended in 2016. But it's a satirical account of all the aspects of society. Business, media, the church, academe, travel, the proletariat. It's a satirical survey, and it's supposed to be ambitious. God, I'm making it sound very boring now, but it's an ambitious overview of what it was like in the first 16 or 17 years of this century. One of the things the publishers are talking about is bringing it all out at once next year, which would be extraordinary. It's a box set, it's enormously long.
Gorge on it.
Longer than Proust. So it would come out in a huge box set the size of a child's coffin. That would be lovely because no one's ever done that before. And instead of going and spending $25 on fiction, you can go and spend $400. Who could resist that?
So you're writing almost full time. Are you teaching as well? Because when I look back at this recent period, in fact, going back not just recently, you've taught at various times: history, English, philosophy, drama, foreign policy, theology, and I'm counting at least 8 universities or international schools over that period. They range from the British International School of Ljubljana to the University of Budapest to private tutoring for Oxford and Cambridge applicants, and. You're clearly drawn to teaching.
Yeah, I'm really drawn to it. It excites me very much. I love doing it, not just with good students, bad students as well. It thrills me. Quite frankly, I'm very good at it as well. So the results are good, especially in tutoring. I do bring people along. So a lot of my work has been private tutoring, to get people to prepare people to apply for very good universities.
How do they find you, Richard? How does somebody get hold of you that would like your skill set?
Well, I don't know. richardmajor.com does it.
I can put that detail in the description of the pod if you like, if that's going to help.
Yeah. So I teach for hire. I am teaching for an extremely good international tutoring firm called Apex, which they'll be able to find. And I've been doing more straightforward teaching at universities and schools all over the world. It's not the normal academic career at all. At the time, I felt I was inventing it, being a tramp academic, turning up in a city and writing to the dean and say, I will be there for a term. And every university in the world is understaffed 2 weeks before term begins because somebody's always frivolously died or got pregnant, and there's always a gap. And they always say, we may as well take him on because it doesn't matter how dreadful he is, he'll be gone at the end of the term. So I've ended up teaching in I don't know how many universities all over the world because it can be done like that. So it's not a serious academic career, but it is a fun way of staying in touch with teaching. And I do believe in that ideal of tertiary education, which is getting a bit battered nowadays horribly battered in America, that everybody should research and everybody should teach. That everybody should teach. It's a sad thing about the American university that increasingly we're seeing an aristocracy appear, a very small aristocracy of tenured professors who simply do research and have enormous grants, and they usually have half a dozen academic slaves to do their bidding, and they do no teaching at all. And the teaching at American universities is often done by the adjuncts, which is to say by graduate students who are paid nothing and will never get a real academic job. So the American academia is moving to a slave model rather than a free labor model, and it's appalling. It's a problem for society at large, not just a problem for the American academia.
Richard, I read a New York Times story on you, and it described you as a tall New Zealander built like a rugby player with a clear voice and a European sensibility. How do you? I don't hear a Kiwi twang in your voice. Obviously, you've been gone a long time. How do you see your own cultural identity now that you've lived out of New Zealand for much longer than you've lived here?
40 years, which is 2/3 of my life. I belong here now. England is home, but broadly speaking, Europe is home. I've lived in, I don't know, 8, I think, European countries, and I genuinely feel that each of them is my place. I don't feel like a foreigner. I come back to New Zealand once every 2 or 3 years, 3 I suppose rather than 2, and that varies, and I'm not there for very long. So when I'm back in New Zealand, I am there almost as a stranger with strong and partly pleasant memories of childhood there. But I do see it from outside, and I think, I don't know, how do you say this nicely?
You don't have to be. You don't have to say it nicely. You can actually say it however you want to say it, Richard.
Okay. Well, what I want to say is this: there are basic geographic and demographic limits to what New Zealand can be. It's a wonderful country. It's affluent. It's extremely stable and peaceful and well governed. It's very attractive to lots of people all over the world to visit and to live in and to escape to. All that's true, but it's always going to be a smallish island nation, a very long way away from everywhere else. No matter what changes, the basic geographical factors that it's a chain of rocky islands adrift between Polynesia and the South Pole. And I'm saying that affectionately. It's dramatic and wonderful. There's nowhere on the planet quite like it, and it's exciting. But it's always going to be a very long way away from East Asia, let alone Europe and North America. And it's always going to have a comparatively small population. So that just means that anyone growing up there who wants to have a very exciting life or to do a lot of things just has to face the fact of traveling around the world to do it. And conversely, people that do stay there and love it and build their lives there have to take on the chin the fact that there are going to be lots of people who go away and don't come back very often, or don't come back very soon, or don't come back at all. I've noticed a certain amount of, grumpiness in some people there when I'm back, because I left and I'm obviously not coming back ever. And some people take that a little personally, which is a shame. It just seems to me the basic statistical facts of where it is and how big it is limit how you can think about it.
Well, I am interested, and we haven't got too long to go, Richard, but when we talked prior to to this conversation, you talked about the observation that there are 1 million Kiwis living out of New Zealand for a reason. We're very good at generating people who are very well liked and wanted by the world.
Yeah, that's true. Although, of course, another way of thinking at it is one of the qualities of the age we're living in is that it is the age of travel, of expatriate life for everybody. Americans want to go to Europe, Europeans want to come to Australasia, Australasians want to go to North America. It's all part of the rich fabric of existence in the third decade of this dreadful century. Many things about the 21st century are bad. One of the really good things is it's much, much, much easier to head off somewhere. If you want to live in Italy and work in Italy, you can. If your soul says I must live in Africa, you can live in Africa. And in fact, if I may plug shamelessly, my next book, which is coming out in March or so, is exactly about that. It's about how American students who, for various reasons, not necessarily to do with the person whose name we don't mention, want to live outside America, can do it. It's a guide to how to go abroad to be an undergraduate, an entirely practical guide about how to go to Europe, Australasia, East Asia. It's a guide about how to apply, how to think it through, how to fund it, which is easy, and how to behave once you get there. So the book's called, sorry about this, it's called Major's Toolbox. I didn't choose that name.
Whatever.
My publishers.
Whatever.
Yeah. No, I really didn't choose the name. But my publishers focus grouped various titles, and that's what they come up with. So, yeah, Major Toolbox is coming out in March. So
and where will people find it?
Go online. It's a New York publisher called Libertayo that's bringing it out. It's going to be a very big print run. Obviously, the primary target is 18-year-old, 17-year-old Americans who are seriously thinking about possibilities of studying abroad. But it really is, I think it would be useful to anybody at all who at that stage of life is thinking about going overseas. Because the moral of the book is just that it's much, much, much easier to do this than people think.
Sure.
If you're a New Zealander who wants to study in South Africa, you can. You really can.
Yeah.
If you're a New Zealander who wants to study in England, you really can. If you're a New Zealander who wants to study in English in Norway, you can. Because Anglophone education is a huge boom industry. Everywhere you go in the world, you can study as a monoglot. I mean, it's shameful to be a monoglot, but still, you can study as a monoglot in English.
I will get the details for the book and where and when people can find that, and I'll pop that also in the description of the pod. In closing, Richard.
Yes.
You've presented your life in 4 acts. My last question to you is, what's in your draft script, if anything, for Act 5? Is there an Act 5?
Oh, old age, decline, death, senility, baldness. I mean, increased baldness.
I think on that cherry note, I think that will just about do it. No, finish the sentence.
I was just going to say, I'm back in England, and I think I'm now a lifer. I don't mean England, I mean Britain. I imagine that my wife and I will spend the rest of our lives in England and Scotland. There are various job possibilities that'll tie us down. My wife's about to retire from the Foreign Service, thank God, and I think we'll be happily settled in England. That's not to say I don't want to travel. Travel really is the best of all drugs. It does what all the other drugs promise, but it really works, and it has no particular side effects except addiction. It's just gorgeous to be able to go all over the world, and also, gloomily, it may be that we're living toward the end of a golden age of travel. Travel has been, in most of my lifetime, or at least most of my 40 years of traveling, preposterously cheap, very, very, very easy to do. Governments have been open, borders have been coming down. Everything seems to have gone into reverse over the last 4 or 5 years. Now it's much more difficult to travel. Even for a New Zealander living in England, there's now an expensive visa you have to think about, which wasn't true in the day. So things are getting worse. And my advice, therefore, is rush out while you can. Obviously, our history may be taking a very grim turn soon. And one of the things I think we learned from the 1930s is that if you can travel, if the world's still pretty much peaceful, if you can go to Europe and Asia and America, you should do it now while you can, because very soon, who knows, it may be a lot more difficult.
100%. Richard, it has been a delight talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me on your birthday.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I would recommend when you next come to New Zealand that you drive very, very quickly through Eketahuna and Palmerston North. That would just be my counsel to you. Yes. And a huge thank you to our audience for joining us. Please subscribe, leave a review. Join me in a fortnight for our next episode of Kiwi Fleas. I'm Paul Sinclair. I've been talking to Dr. Richard Major, and it's time for us to flee.